Why did right-wing terrorism just disappear? Asks Timothy of the Pool, and that is a question worth answering. Now, the short answer is, well, basically, the ADL are no longer the ones counting and defining terrorism, but there is a significantly longer and more complex one, an interesting one, that answers this Axios article. The studies find that suddenly right-wing terrorism just sort of disappeared out of nowhere to be quadrupled, quintupled by the left-wing's equivalent. So, a lot of this comes in the context of the recent presidential memorandum countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence, which of course dovetails quite nicely into his declaration of Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. That classification does have a lot of problems, which we'll also touch upon over the course of this video, but this entire memorandum is rather interesting, and I want to read it out to you because a lot of people are now saying that this is a right-wing escalation. I've seen a lot of people on the left wing on Twitter going, oh, he's violating the First Amendment, this is the right coming for us, this is the death squad, this is Trump crushing the opposition, and honestly, I don't even see this as escalation. I see this as, oh, you know all of those things you've done to us for the last 10 years? We're gonna legalize doing the same to you. Which, judging by my recent few videos, I think you can guess my stance on. So, heinous assassinations and other acts of political violence in the United States have dramatically increased in recent years. And that is sort of kind of true, although there have been significantly hotter periods in relatively recent US history, but yeah, overall. Even in the aftermath of the horrifying assassination of Charlie Kirk, some individuals who adhere to the alleged shooter's ideology embraced and cheered this evil murderer while actively encouraging more political violence. That, however, is 1000% true. Indeed, many of the people who cheered this on and refused to disavow political violence then, well, they're still doing it right now. Destiny, the second cuckold of his name, the left needs to stop unilaterally disavowing violence. Until the president leads on the issue. See, here's the thing. I've seen this also all over Twitter today. Oh, where is the right now on the recent Mormon shooting? Well, firstly, that is a situation more confused than I'd like to see it, as the sheer amount of AI-manipulated images about the alleged shooter going around is a worrying indication of things to come. But even if he does indeed turn out to be full-blown MAGA, well, we've always disavowed political violence. You're not going to find a whole lot of people on the right going, oh yeah, you know, left-wingers, they need to be afraid of being murdered to go when going to events. You're not going to find that, largely because we've been operating in a system where the algorithm, YouTube, Facebook, social media in general, have been actively cracking down on us. We know that's a line we don't cross. For the left, however, their rules have not applied to them for even a second, which is why Destiny still has a YouTube channel, still has a Twitter account. But again, yeah, no, absolutely. This was preceded by the 2024 assassination of a senior healthcare executive, which the left cheered on, and the 2022 assassination attempt against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Two separate assassination attempts against my own life in less than 3 months took place during the 2024 presidential election cycle. Riots in Los Angeles in Portland reflects more than 1,000% increase in attacks on US immigration and customs enforcement ICE officers since January 21st, 2025. 1,000%. Again, I'm assuming a little bit of good old-fashioned Trumpian bloviation there, but Jesus. Just yesterday, a shooting targeted an ICE facility in Dallas resulted in multiple casualties. Separate anti-police and criminal justice riots have left many people dead and injured and inflicted over $2 billion in property damage nationwide. Hell, I think 2 billion is, if anything, underselling it this time. This political violence is not a series of isolated incidents and does not emerge organically. Instead, it is a culmination of sophisticated, organized campaigns of targeted intimidation. Yes, it is stochastic terrorism is what it is. Stochastic terrorism is an amply applied tool of the political left, the fringes admittedly, but still very much so, where what they are doing, the definition of stochastic terrorism, is in essence saying, my enemy is evil, the worst kind of evil. Fascists. They are monsters and they will destroy everything you hold dear. But I would never encourage you to go out and do anything about it. Never. And when somebody does do the thing you are very blatantly urging them to do, you can turn around and go, oh my, well, I didn't expect that outcome. Radicalization, threats and violence designed to silence opposing speech, limit political activity, change or direct policy outcomes, and prevent the function of a democratic society. A new law enforcement strategy that investigates all participants in these criminals and terroristic conspiracies, including the organized structures, networks, entities, organizations, founding society sources, and predication actions behind them is required. Now, this too, networks, entities, organizations. There are a lot of entities and individuals fomenting this. These campaigns often begin by isolating and dehumanizing specific targets to justify murder or other violent actions against them. They do so through a variety of fora, including anonymous chat forums, in-person meetings, social media, and even educational institutions. Primarily. These campaigns then escalate to organized doxing, where private identify information of their targets, such as home address, phone number, or other personal information, is exposed to the public with the explicit intent of encouraging others to harass, intimidate, or violently assault them. Correct. In fact, we even have Democrats stating this openly. The rather famous political clip, for example, of, I do not remember her name, but a African-American individual standing up in a speech saying Republicans cannot be allowed to have any rest. If you see one of them in public, you need to go up and harass them. As in the case of several ICE agents in Los Angeles being doxxed, the goal of these campaigns can be to obstruct the operations of the federal government, as well as aid and abet criminal activity the federal government is lawfully pursuing. Correct. In fact, one might heartily argue that California is practically a breakaway state at this point. These campaigns are coordinated and perpetrated by actors who have developed a comprehensive strategy to achieve specific policy goals through radicalization and violent intimidation. Yes, there is very much so a playbook at play here. There are common recurrent motivations and indica uniting this pattern of violent terrorism activities under the umbrella of self-described anti-fascism. These movements portray foundational American principles, e.g. support for law enforcement and border control, as fascist to justify and encourage acts of violent revolution. This anti-fascist lie has become the organizing rallying cry used by domestic terrorists to wage a violent assault against democratic institutions, constitutional rights, and fundamental American liberties. Common threads animating this violent conduct include anti-American, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the United States government, extremism on migration, race, gender, and hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. As described in the order of September 22, 2025, designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization, the groups and entities that perpetuate this extremism have created a movement that embraces and elevates violence to achieve political outcomes, including justifying additional assassinations, for example, Charlie Kirk's alleged assassinating grave the bullets used in murder with so-called anti-fascist rhetoric. So, this list here is very important, as what they're saying: migration, race, gender, hostility, American values, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity. These are now becoming prescribed topics for the left, in the exact same way that the right has had dozens of topics forbidden to it. You are not allowed to speak negatively on gay rights. You are not allowed to speak negatively on immigration, lest you be called a bigot, a fascist, etc., etc. This is the same thing. And again, those two are legally enforced things. Now, less so in America, although still so, as, well, if you attack a symbol of the left, say, for example, a pride crosswalk, that can come as a felony with 10 years in prison. That is the left going, no, our icons are sacrosanct. Our values are sacrosanct, and we will use the full force of the law against you if you violate them. This is the right doing the same. No. If you're anti-American, if you're anti-capitalist, if you're anti-Christian, we're going to crack down on you now. These are now our sacrosanct values, and as you have so ably demonstrated, we should protect those using the law. The United States requires a national strategy to investigate and disrupt networks, entities, and organizations that foment political violence, so that law enforcement can intervene in criminal conspiracies before they result in violent political acts. Through this comprehensive strategy, law enforcement will disband and uproot networks, entities, and organizations that promote organized violence, violent intimidation, conspiracies against rights, and other efforts to disrupt the function of a democratic society. This is also what has got a lot of left-wing podcasters sweating heavily, because what you have now is the right going, we have a series of topics. If you violate them, if you speak negatively about them, we're going to call you a communist, basically. Accurately most of the time. And then we are going to apply to you the standards that you have established for everybody else. And this will now also create a domestic terrorist organization. So the rest of this is mostly outlaying specifics, etc. And of course, yes, indeed, the domestic terrorism thing does have a lot of problems under US law, because unlike foreign terrorism, the federal government does not have a mechanism to formally charge an individual with domestic terrorism. So this isn't really going to be, oh, you're a terrorist. It is, you are going to violate these laws and principles of ours now, which will in essence be utilized in much the same way as the hate crime laws, for all intents and purposes, that you see around left-wing ideals. Basically, they'll say that by doing this, you are fomenting violence. Thus, they can persecute you with the terrorist laws, in essence, without actually using this specific legislation. Now, I still would happily like to see Antifa declared a foreign terrorist organization, but this is a good step in that direction. So, this obviously has the left very, 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 very scared, because they recognize this stick. They made this stick. They know how to wield it, and they're now seeing it in the double-handed grip of the orange man and thinking, I wish we hadn't made it so spiky. Yes, very much so. Because again, I wish to reiterate, the reason why Destiny, Hassan, Vosh still have social media is because they are not policed by the same standards as the right. If the right were to say something like this, if Sargon of Akkad, like say 5 years ago, would make a video saying, I am all for political violence, we need more political violence, how do you think that's going to work out? We don't even need to think, we know, because Sargon had his channel originally demonetized for a fuck of a load less. So, let us then also talk about the domestic terrorism issue, shall we? Because a stick that is often used by the ADL and the left is that actually, look at this, there's far more right-wing terrorism than left-wing, and this Axios survey shows that has radically changed, seemingly suddenly out of nowhere. Now, a part of this is of course going to be that the right is right now really, really happy. It is seeing retribution happen. It is being given consequences for the actions of the left. Now, there is still going to be potential outliers, like potentially the one that happened at the Mormon church the other day, but this also comes from the definition of right-wing terrorism, which includes things like the United States Capitol attack, for example, which is one of the strangest terrorist attacks in goddamn history. And the article on right-wing terrorism in and of itself is fascinating, because the Wikipedia one has very little actual specific examples, and often they have things like, yes, you remember when the white supremacist Juan Carlos shot up a mall? I mean, supposedly yes, indeed. And there's also the matter of who is counting here. So again, the definition of terrorism has been predominantly one created by the left wing. That is why the majority of attacks have been right wing, because the majority of the left wing attacks simply haven't been counted. So, what is the definition of a terrorist attack as we see here? It is in essence to ideologically driven crimes committed in the United States by individuals whose actions are directed or motivated by foreign groups in order to direct or influence the government. Okay, that's a fairly simple and easy definition. Terrorism is when you do something in order to either intimidate the population to vote a certain way, or to make sure that certain legislation is forced through via fear, basically. It's, again, Destiny's conservatives need to be afraid of getting murdered at events, in the most literal sense. Okay then, well, here's the thing. If left-wing terror attacks reach record highs in 2025 with actual assassinations, why are the numbers previously so very, very low? Maybe the right is the problem? Well, remember that graph again? Let's see here. So we've got like 30. So the highest number is like 30 attacks, and that's both of them. What about the 100 attacks on pro-life organizations, for example, in 2022? Why weren't those counted? We know why somebody would attack a pro-life organization. Or even more directly, why weren't the Tesla attacks counted? We know again that was explicitly a case of political violence, where the people attacking Tesla dealerships did it because they were owned by Elon Musk. They wanted people to be afraid of buying Teslas. They wanted to hurt Elon via his dealerships and via his businesses. This, to a T, fits the definition of terrorism. Now, you might happily argue that nobody was killed as far as I know in these attacks, and fair enough, but that isn't our definition of terrorism. It is attempting to cause political change via fear, and attacking a specific car, trying to go like, oh, if you drive one of those, or even cancelling people's social life by making owning a Tesla not cool, for example. Another broad thing. Here in Norway, Teslas were very, very popular, largely because we are, at least publicly, a very left-wing virtue signaling country, whereas underneath all of that, less so. Where people found the English, where people felt the need to put on like stickers on their cars going, I bought this before Elon went crazy, and stuff like that, because they were afraid that the left would attack them over their politics. And a lot of this comes from the people who used to define this being, well, groups like the ADL, who, when they cover Antifa, they say things like, you know, there's no real thing as Antifa, a decentralized and leaderless movement, no organizations. Despite if you Google them, you'll find the fucking street address for various headquarters, various chapters. But, you know, they're just anti-fascism, basically. That's all. You know, that's all. And, you know, whilst there's occasionally, you know, there are people who claim to associate it with Antifa who do engage in violence and vandalism, but that's really unusual. Meanwhile, Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's organization, white nationalists, platform for extremism and far-right conspiracy theories. Yeah. The left has a very long history of extending the maximum amount of charity to its own side, and absolutely none whatsoever to the right. And now, well, the government is shifting. It is looking at all this and going, okay, we could spend a ridiculous amount of money going after the right wing, or we could spend that same amount of money going after the left wing. And honestly, the left has no leg to stand on here. Again, the stats we already have, we already know to be doctored. I'd prefer it if the money was split evenly on focusing on both priorities, I'll happily say as much, but the left has already done this. When the left then gets their strategies turned on them, Sorry if I'm not particularly, upset by that. As I said in the previous video on this topic, if we are indeed in the prisoner's dilemma, then simply surrendering over and over again gets us nothing but more pain, whereas retribution might actually teach the opposition some valuable lessons about how to behave. It's very, very valuable. You do not want to become Great Britain, for example, as over there, Great Britain right now is the country in the world that arrests and jails the most people over social media posts in total. More than Russia, more than dictator regimes. And it is very much so based on the same liberal ideology as the United States is. So I say give retribution a chance. And we'll worry about the potential misuse of these powers later, because, yeah, I can absolutely see a problem behind the United States government saying, oh, we have a set of specific values that we wish to protect with the force of the law. Okay, and if that hadn't already been done, I'd be all against it. But since it has, bring on the cudgel. Apply it liberally for a good 3, 4, 5 years, probably, and let's see if the opposition comes to their senses, as yet again, I've said this so many times, but the only way to hammer this point home to the left, particularly its commentator class, is to make them fear for their careers, to make them, as the right has, measure every word. And that is how you cow the left wing. Do let me know, as always, in the comment section down below what you think of all of this, and until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good day.